Ethan Wick's fingers trembled slightly as he folded the deed to Westbrook Apartments, his apartments now, and slipped it into his Italian suit jacket. Through the tinted windows of his Bentley, he studied the weathered brick building where 7 years ago he'd mopped floors, fixed leaky pipes, and endured daily humiliation. "Sir, we've arrived," his driver said, opening the car door to a neighborhood that had once chewed him up and spat him out. The morning air hit his face like a memory, a peculiar mix of street vendor spices and urban decay. A group of residents huddled by the entrance, anxiously awaiting the mysterious new owner who'd bought not just their building, but the entire block. None of them recognized him yet. That was exactly as he'd planned. "Look at this suit," whispered Tony Montana, the same man who once accidentally spilled coffee on Ethan's maintenance uniform every Monday morning. Another rich asshole buying up properties he'll never visit. Ethan's jaw tightened. They had no idea they were staring at the same nobody whose business plans they'd mockingly passed around at the tenant holiday party years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice deeper and more commanding than the last time they'd heard it. "My name is Ethan Wick, CEO of Phoenix Holdings. I've called this meeting because effective immediately, there will be significant changes to Westbrook Apartments." The color drained from Tony's face. Dominic Toretto, who once led the chorus of laughter when Ethan talked about his dreams of becoming an entrepreneur, dropped his cigarette. But it was the expression on Natasha Bourne's face that caught him off guard. Was that guilt in her eyes? Or something else entirely? "Each of you will receive an envelope," Ethan continued, nodding to his assistant who began distributing sealed documents. "Inside, you'll find your new rental terms. Some of you will discover your rent has been lowered. Others will find notices of non-renewal." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The decisions were not made arbitrarily, he added, meeting the eyes of those who'd once made his life hell. "I've put considerable thought into each tenant's contribution to this community." Natasha stepped forward, her hands shaking as she held her unopened envelope. "Ethan? Is it really you?" The murmurs intensified. Recognition dawned on their faces, followed by fear. The maintenance boy? The dreamer? The nobody? Ethan smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "I'm giving everyone 30 days to either accept their new terms or vacate. I'll be personally meeting with each tenant to discuss their situation." As the crowd dispersed in panic, Dominic approached, his former swagger replaced with a desperate smile. "Hey man, good to see you. I always knew you'd make something of yourself." "Did you?" Ethan asked quietly. "That's not how I remember it." He turned away, catching a glimpse of movement in a second-floor window. Someone watching intently. Someone he hadn't seen yet. Someone who might be the very person who had sabotaged his first business and sent his life spiraling. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his investigator. "Asterisk found something about the fire that destroyed your first office. You need to see this. Asterisk." The game had begun. 7 years of planning, of rebuilding himself from nothing, of tracking down every person who'd been in this building during his darkest days. Now he would finally discover which of these people had destroyed everything he'd worked for, and make them pay. What he didn't count on was discovering that the past he remembered might not be the full truth, and that revenge, once set in motion, rarely follows the plan. Hello there, wonderful viewers. I hope you're enjoying this tale of sweet revenge and hidden truths. Where are you watching from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you're enjoying this journey of betrayal and justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, the twists coming up will leave you speechless. Are you Team Ethan? Or do you think revenge is never the answer? Let me know below. The Westbrook Apartments stood 6 stories tall, but to Ethan, it had always been a monument to broken dreams. 7 years ago, he'd lived in the basement utility room, an arrangement the former superintendent allowed in exchange for extra maintenance work. By day, he fixed toilets and patched walls. By night, he built his first tech startup from a folding table wedged between the boiler and electrical panel. Ethan poured himself a scotch in his temporary office, the renovated penthouse suite that once belonged to Helena Gatsby, the socialite who'd hosted parties where tenants would take turns impersonating, the maintenance boy with delusions of grandeur. She'd been the first to receive an eviction notice. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in, Vincent." Vincent Lebowski, Ethan's head of security and the only person he trusted completely, entered the room. They'd met in a homeless shelter after Ethan lost everything. Vincent had been a former Special Forces operator who'd hit rock bottom after 3 tours in Afghanistan. They'd rebuilt their lives together. "The background checks came through," Vincent said, placing a stack of folders on the desk. "Complete histories on every tenant, just as you requested." Ethan opened the top file. Tony Montana, 4B. Former pharmaceutical sales rep, now regional manager. The man who'd once accidentally knocked Ethan's laptop into a mop bucket, destroying 6 months of coding work. And the surveillance. Cameras are active in all common areas. Audio in the lobby and hallways. Vincent hesitated. "Are you sure about this, Ethan?" Living among them, watching them squirm. Ethan swirled his scotch. "Someone in this building sabotaged my company, Vincent." Anonymous tip to investors about non-existent fraud. "The mysterious office fire that destroyed my backup servers." The coordinated withdrawal of all financial support. His knuckles whitened around the glass. "They didn't just mock my dreams, they actively destroyed them." Vincent nodded. "And your father?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Ethan turned to the window, remembering his father's face in the hospital bed. He died believing I'd failed him, that his sacrifices were for nothing. He set the glass down with deliberate care. "I promised him on his deathbed that I'd discover who was responsible." "And then what?" Ethan didn't answer. Later that evening, he walked the building's perimeter, cataloging needed repairs and remembering old humiliations. Near the back entrance, he noticed a small garden, vibrant and lovingly tended amid the urban decay. He knelt to examine an unusual orchid variety. "Paphiopedilum malapoense," said a voice behind him. "They're not supposed to thrive in this climate, but they're surprisingly resilient with the right care." He turned to find Natasha Bourne watching him, her arms folded against the evening chill. In the years since he'd last seen her, her once rebellious blue hair had returned to its natural auburn, though her eyes remained the same piercing green that had once seen through his facade. "You always did know your orchids," Ethan replied carefully. Natasha had been different from the others, the brilliant botanist who'd kept to herself, who'd neither joined in the mockery nor defended him from it. They'd spoken perhaps 5 times in total, yet each conversation remained etched in his memory. "My envelope," she said without preamble. "My rent was cut in half." "Was it?" "You know it was." "Why?" Before he could answer, shouting erupted from the front of the building. They rounded the corner to find Dominic Toretto on his knees in the street, belongings scattered around him. His wife Sophie clutched their young daughter, tears streaming down her face. "Please," Dominic was saying to Vincent. "We just need more time." "Eviction orders are effective immediately for certain tenants," Vincent replied coldly. Ethan hadn't authorized immediate evictions. He approached the scene, noting the curious faces watching from windows above. "Vincent, a word." When they were out of earshot, Ethan hissed, "I said 30 days. For everyone. Not for him." Vincent handed Ethan a file. "Toretto lost his job 6 months ago. He's been working minimum wage at a gas station. They were already 3 months behind on rent before you bought the building." Ethan glanced back at the man who had once led a chorus of laughter when Ethan pitched his business to a potential investor in the lobby. Now Dominic's daughter, who couldn't have been more than 5, clutched a worn teddy bear, her small face a portrait of confusion. "Put them in 2C temporarily," Ethan said. "The furnished unit." Vincent raised an eyebrow. That wasn't the plan. Plans change. As Vincent delivered the news to the stunned family, Natasha stepped beside Ethan. "That was unexpected." "Business decision," Ethan replied flatly. "Nothing more." Her knowing smile suggested she didn't believe him, but before she could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his investigator. Asterisk found something on the building's former owner. "Meeting in 20 minutes. Asterisk." "I have to go," he told her. "Ethan," she called as he walked away. "Be careful digging into the past. Not all buried things should be unearthed." He froze. "What do you know?" "More than you think," she replied. "And perhaps more than you're ready to hear." Rain lashed against the windows of the diner as Ethan waited for his investigator. The place was nearly empty at this late hour, just a waitress refilling coffee cups, and an elderly man doing a crossword puzzle. Jack Deckard slid into the booth across from him, shaking water from his coat. The former detective had the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's darker side. "What did you find?" Ethan asked. Jack placed a thin file on the table. "The previous owner of Westbrook Apartments, Harold Keaton, died 3 months before you purchased the building." "I know this already. What you don't know is how connected he was to your past." Jack opened the file. Keaton was a silent investor in Westfield Investments. Ethan's blood ran cold. Westfield had been the first firm to pull funding from his startup after the fraud allegations. Their withdrawal had triggered the exodus of his other investors. "That's not all," Jack continued. "Keaton's daughter worked for the fire marshal's office at the time of the fire that destroyed your office." "The fire that was ruled an accident," Ethan murmured. "Right. The very convenient electrical fire that somehow started exactly where your backup servers were located." Jack leaned forward. "Here's where it gets interesting. After the fire, Keaton made substantial payments to 3 of your current tenants." Jack pushed forward 3 photographs: Tony Montana, Helena Gatsby, and, most surprisingly, Ellis McLean, the quiet accountant from 3F who'd barely registered in Ethan's memory. "What's the connection between them?" "Still working on that," Jack replied. "But there's something else. The night before the fraud allegations went public, someone accessed your company's financial records using credentials belonging to." The diner's door chimed. Ethan glanced up to see Natasha entering, shaking rain from an umbrella. Their eyes met across the room, and surprise flickered across her face. Jack noticed his distraction. "Friend of yours?" "Former neighbor," Ethan murmured, watching as Natasha spoke briefly with the waitress, then collected a takeout bag. As she turned to leave, a man bumped into her, Ellis McLean himself. The quiet accountant apologized profusely, helped gather the dropped food container, then hurried out. Natasha stood frozen, staring after him with an expression Ethan couldn't decipher. "That's him," Jack whispered, pointing at the departing Ellis. "That's one of Keaton's payees." Natasha spotted them watching and, after a moment's hesitation, approached their table. "Ethan," she nodded, then glanced at Jack with obvious suspicion. "Business meeting," Ethan explained, closing the file. "What brings you here?" "Tuesday special," she replied, holding up her bag. "Green chili stew. It's the only thing that helps my migraines." Her gaze lingered on the closed file. "Finding what you're looking for?" "Getting closer," Ethan said carefully. A strange expression crossed her face. "Some truths are more complicated than revenge fantasies, Ethan." After she left, Jack raised an eyebrow. "Interesting woman." "Focus," Ethan said. "You were about to tell me who accessed my company's records." Jack reopened the file and pointed to a name. Ethan's stomach dropped. "That's impossible," he whispered. "That's—" His phone rang, Vincent's number. "What is it?" "Fire alarm at Westbrook," Vincent said urgently. "Small fire in the basement near the electrical room. It's contained, but..." "But what?" "Someone broke into your office during the evacuation. They were specifically targeting your files on the tenants." Ethan stood abruptly. "I'm on my way." "There's more," Vincent continued, his voice tight. "They left something for you. A note that says, 'Stop looking or history repeats itself.'" By the time Ethan arrived at Westbrook, fire trucks were already pulling away. Residents huddled under the building's awning, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. The accidental electrical fire had been small but strategically placed a warning. His office had been ransacked, drawers emptied onto the floor. The tenant files were untouched, but his personal notes, the timeline of events from 7 years ago, were missing. "Security footage?" he asked Vincent. "Scrambled during the exact 8 minutes of the break-in. Professional job." Ethan surveyed the damage. "Someone doesn't want me digging into the past." "Or someone sending a message," Vincent suggested. Same as before, fire, strategic damage. History repeating itself, Ethan murmured, recalling the note. As the residents returned to their apartments, Ethan noticed Ellis McLean slipping away. On impulse, he followed the accountant through the rain-slicked streets to a 24-hour pharmacy. Inside, Ellis purchased something at the prescription counter, shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible burden. Ethan confronted him in the empty parking lot. "Mr. McLean." Ellis startled, nearly dropping his paper bag. "Mr. Wick. I was just getting my medication." "Harold Keaton," Ethan said flatly. "You took payments from him 7 years ago." "Why?" The color drained from Ellis's face. "I don't know what." "Don't lie to me." Ethan stepped closer. "I know about the payments. I know about the connection to Westfield Investments. What I don't know is your role." Ellis's hands trembled. "Please, not here." His eyes darted nervously. "They might be watching." "Who?" "Tomorrow," Ellis whispered. "The coffee shop across from the park. 10 a.m. I'll tell you everything." He hurried away before Ethan could respond. Back at Westbrook, Ethan found Natasha waiting outside his apartment door. "Breaking and entering now?" he asked. "Neighborly concern," she countered. "Heard about the fire. Old buildings like this, electrical issues can be problematic." "It wasn't an accident." "I know." Her directness surprised him. "Just like the fire at your office 7 years ago wasn't an accident." Ethan studied her. "How would you know that?" Instead of answering, she handed him a weathered envelope. "I've kept this for 7 years. I was going to burn it after you bought the building, but..." She took a deep breath. "You deserve to know some of the truth." Inside was a handwritten letter dated 1 week before his company collapsed. The signature at the bottom made his heart stop. Harold Keaton. "Where did you get this?" "He gave it to me," Natasha said quietly. "Asked me to hold it as insurance." "Against what?" "Against the people he was working with." Her eyes met his. "Keaton was afraid, Ethan. Someone was using him, threatening him." Ethan scanned the letter, his confusion growing. This mentions a necessary sacrifice and protecting the greater investment. What does that mean? "I don't know. He never told me everything." She hesitated. "But I do know that what happened to you was part of something larger, something that involved more than just a few jealous neighbors." "Why would Keaton trust you with this?" A shadow crossed her face. "We had history, complicated history." Before he could press further, shouting erupted from the floor below. They rushed downstairs to find Dominic Toretto being physically restrained by Vincent. Dominic's wife sobbed nearby. "What's happening?" Ethan demanded. "Found him trying to access the basement electrical room," Vincent reported. "I was just looking for the circuit breaker." Dominic protested. "Our power went out." "With lockpicks." Vincent held up a small set of tools. Ethan studied the man who'd once been his chief tormentor. "Put him in the maintenance office. I'll deal with this personally." Alone with Dominic, Ethan circled the chair where the former bully now sat, head bowed. "Sabotage twice in one night," Ethan mused. "Seems unlikely." "It's not what you think," Dominic whispered. "Then explain." Dominic looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "They have my daughter." "What?" "Sophie took Emily to her mother's after the fire. On the way, someone forced them off the road." His voice broke. "They let Sophie go with a message. I have to destroy evidence in the basement or they'll hurt Emily." "What evidence?" "I don't know." Dominic shouted. "They just said you're getting too close, and that I needed to destroy the old maintenance logs from the electrical room." Ethan's mind raced. The maintenance logs would show who had access to which areas 7 years ago, potentially revealing who could have sabotaged his equipment. "Why would they think you could help them?" Ethan asked. Dominic's shoulders slumped. "Because I helped them before." He looked up, eyes filled with shame. "I wasn't the mastermind, Ethan. I was just a pawn. We all were." A text from Jack interrupted. *emergency. Found connection between Keaton, Westfield, and your father's old company. Meet now, *. As Ethan headed for the door, Dominic called after him. "It was never personal, Ethan. We were all just following orders." "Whose orders?" The same person who has my daughter. Outside, Ethan found Natasha waiting. I heard everything, she admitted. This is escalating too quickly. You should stay away from me, Ethan warned. It's not safe. To his surprise, she fell into step beside him. I've been part of this since the beginning, whether you knew it or not. She pulled her coat tighter. Besides, you're not the only one seeking answers about the past. As they walked through the rain, Ethan realized that his carefully constructed revenge plan was unraveling. What had seemed a simple narrative of betrayal and retribution was revealing itself to be something far more complex. And at the center of it all was a question he hadn't considered. What if his father's death and his company's destruction weren't separate tragedies, but connected parts of a larger conspiracy? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, stop now, or the girl dies. Some dreams should stay buried. Asterisk. Attached was a photo of Dominic's terrified daughter clutching her teddy bear, tears streaming down her small face. The coffee shop across from the park sat empty save for a barista arranging pastries and Ellis McLean hunched over a laptop in the corner. Outside, rain continued to fall, obscuring the windows and lending the morning a dreamlike quality. Ethan slid into the booth across from Ellis, Natasha beside him. They hadn't spoken much since receiving the photo of Dominic's daughter, both lost in their own thoughts about what it meant and who could be behind it. You shouldn't have brought her, Ellis whispered, eyes darting nervously to Natasha. I trust her, Ethan said, surprising himself with the truth of it. Tell us what you know about Keaton and the payments. Ellis closed his laptop. First, you need to understand the context. 7 years ago, Westbrook wasn't just an apartment building. It was an investment vehicle. For what? For a group called the Consortium. Harold Keaton was their front man, but he answered to someone else. Ellis's fingers trembled as he pushed a flash drive across the table. Everything's here, financial records, communications, the real estate portfolio they were assembling. Ethan pocketed the drive. What does this have to do with my startup? Your company's AI real estate valuation algorithm threatened their entire operation. Ellis leaned forward. You were developing a system that could identify undervalued properties based on infrastructure projections, the same properties they were quietly acquiring through shell companies. So they destroyed my company because I was competition? Not competition. Exposure. Ellis's voice dropped lower. Your algorithm would have revealed the pattern of their acquisitions, exposing their entire network. They couldn't let that happen. Natasha touched Ethan's arm. Who are they, Ellis? Who was Keaton working for? Before Ellis could answer, his phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the message. I have to go. Now. We're not finished, Ethan insisted. They know I'm talking to you. Ellis stood abruptly. Everything you need is on that drive, including, he stopped, staring past them toward the door. Too late. A sleek black car had pulled up outside. A woman in an impeccable suit emerged, her face partially obscured by an umbrella. Who is that? Natasha asked. Ellis was already gathering his things. Alexandra Ripley, Keaton's daughter. His hands shook violently. She works for them. The fire marshal's daughter, Ethan realized, remembering Jack's information. Ellis nodded. She's the one who ruled your office fire and accident. She's the one who... He stopped again as Alexandra entered the coffee shop, shaking water from her umbrella. Mr. McLean, she called pleasantly. And Mr. Wick. What a surprise. Ellis made a move toward the back exit, but Alexandra's smile hardened. I wouldn't, Ellis. Remember our arrangement. What arrangement? Ethan demanded, standing to face her. Alexandra's perfectly composed face betrayed nothing as she approached their table. Mr. Wick, I've been looking forward to meeting you properly. She extended a manicured hand, which Ethan ignored. I understand you've been asking questions about my father, among other things. Then perhaps we should talk privately. Her eyes flicked to Natasha. Family matters, you understand. Family matters? Ethan repeated, confusion evident. Alexandra's smile widened fractionally. Oh, you don't know. She turned to Ellis. You haven't told him? Ellis looked physically ill. Alexandra, please. Harold Keaton was your uncle, Mr. Wick, she said smoothly. Your father's half-brother. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. That's impossible. Is it? Did you never wonder why your father was so supportive of your little startup? Why he introduced you to those particular investors? She glanced at her watch. I have a car waiting. We should continue this conversation somewhere more private. Ethan felt Natasha's hand slip into his, steadying him. We're not going anywhere with you. Alexandra sighed. I was hoping to do this civilly. She nodded toward the window, where a man leaned against the black car, holding a phone. That's my associate. He's currently on a call with the people holding Dominic Toretto's daughter. One word from me, and... Stop. Ethan's mind raced. What do you want? The flash drive Ellis just gave you, and your agreement to sell Westbrook back to us, immediately. Why Westbrook? What's so special about that building? Alexandra's perfect composure slipped for just a moment. The building itself isn't special. It's what's underneath it. She held out her hand. The drive, please. Before Ethan could respond, the coffee shop door burst open. Jack Deckard stood there, gun drawn. FBI. Hands where I can see them. Everything happened at once. Alexandra's associate fired at Jack from outside. Glass shattered. Customers screamed. Ellis lunged for the back exit. In the chaos, Natasha pulled Ethan down behind a table as Jack and Alexandra's associate exchanged gunfire. We need to go, Natasha whispered, pulling him toward the kitchen. Jack is FBI apparently. He can handle himself. They escaped through the kitchen service entrance into the alley behind the coffee shop. Gunfire continued inside. My car's 2 blocks south, Ethan said, gripping the flash drive in his pocket. As they ran through the rain, Ethan's mind spun with Alexandra's revelation. Harold Keaton, his uncle? His father had never mentioned a brother. Yet it would explain how he'd gotten meetings with those particular investors so easily. How his father had seemed to know exactly which properties his algorithm should focus on. Ethan, wait. Natasha pulled him into a doorway, shielded from the rain. Before we go any further, there's something you need to know. The intensity in her eyes stopped him cold. I didn't live at Westbrook by accident, she admitted. I was placed there. What are you talking about? I worked for Westfield Investments as a research analyst. I was assigned to monitor you, to report on your progress. The words tumbled out in a rush. I was supposed to be their eyes inside the building. Ethan stepped back as if she'd struck him. You were spying on me? At first, yes. But then I saw what you were building, how brilliant it was. Her eyes pleaded for understanding. When I reported that your algorithm would expose their acquisition pattern, they ordered me to help take you down. I refused. Why would you refuse? You barely knew me. Because what you created was revolutionary. And because... She hesitated. Because I saw how they destroyed people who got in their way. I couldn't be part of that. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from Vincent. Asterisk, someone broke into your father's old storage unit. They took everything. Asterisk. We need to go there, Ethan said. Now. At the storage facility, they found the unit's door hanging open, the contents ransacked. Vincent stood inside, cataloging the damage. They knew exactly what they were looking for, he reported. Targeted your father's business records and research notes. Ethan surveyed the chaos, a new suspicion forming. They're trying to erase something. Some connection between my father, Keaton, and Westbrook. His phone rang, Jack Deckard's number. Are you all right? Ethan asked when he answered. Wounded, but alive, Jack replied, his voice strained. Alexandra Ripley escaped, but we've detained her associate. And I've got Ellis McLean in protective custody. You're really FBI? Undercover for 3 years, investigating the consortium. I was assigned to you when you started asking questions about your company's collapse. A pause. Ellis is talking. He says there's evidence of the consortium's entire operation hidden somewhere in the Westbrook building. Something your father and Keaton placed there years ago. What kind of evidence? He doesn't know exactly. Just that it's why they're so desperate to get the building back. After hanging up, Ethan turned to Natasha. If you were monitoring me for Westfield, you must know something about what's hidden at Westbrook. She shook her head. I only handled technical analysis of your algorithm. But, she hesitated. There were rumors about a failsafe, something Harold Keaton had hidden as insurance against the people he worked for. The letter you gave me, Ethan realized. He gave it to you as insurance. Yes, but I never understood what it meant. She pulled out her phone, showing him an old photo. This was taken the day before your company collapsed. The photo showed a younger Natasha with Harold Keaton in what appeared to be the Westbrook basement. Keaton was pointing at something on the wall, his expression intense. That's the old boiler room, Ethan said, where I lived. Vincent, who had been examining the storage unit's security footage, called them over. You need to see this. The grainy video showed Alexandra Ripley directing the storage unit break-in. Beside her stood a man Ethan recognized immediately, though he'd aged considerably. That's Charles Beckham, Ethan whispered. My father's former business partner. Vincent nodded grimly. The man who delivered his eulogy. And the man who convinced me to move into Westbrook in the first place. The rain had stopped by the time they returned to Westbrook, replaced by an eerie stillness that seemed to envelop the building. Police cars surrounded the entrance. Jack had kept his promise to send protection after the coffee shop shooting. Inside, Ethan headed straight for his office, Natasha and Vincent following. He connected Ellis's flash drive to his computer, but found it encrypted with a password he didn't recognize. Try Icarus, Natasha suggested. Ethan looked up in surprise. How would you know that? It was the code name for your father and Keaton's original project. When he continued staring, she added, my father worked with them, briefly. Before he disappeared. The password worked. The drive contained thousands of documents, financial records, property deeds, email exchanges. At the center was a folder labeled Simply Westbrook. Inside was a single video file, dated the day before Harold Keaton's death. The video showed Keaton sitting in what appeared to be his home office, looking haggard and afraid. If you're seeing this, Ethan, then I'm already gone, Keaton began. And you've started asking the right questions. Ethan watched in stunned silence as his supposed uncle explained how a real estate investment scheme had evolved into something much darker. Political bribes, blackmail, even orchestrated accidents for those who threatened the consortium's interests. Your father discovered what was happening, Keaton continued. He tried to stop it, to expose Charles Beckham and the others. That's why they killed him. Ethan's breath caught. His father's heart attack, not natural after all. Your startup wasn't random, Ethan. Your father designed it that way, to appear harmless until it could gather enough data to expose the entire network. He placed you at Westbrook to give you access to the one thing that could bring them all down. Keaton leaned closer to the camera. Hidden in the building's original blueprints is the location of a safe. Inside that safe is evidence of every crime the consortium has committed for the past 30 years, including your father's murder. Keaton's expression grew more desperate. Find it, Ethan. Finish what your father started. But be careful. Charles Beckham will kill anyone who threatens him, even his own goddaughter. The video ended abruptly. Ethan sat back, mind reeling. Goddaughter? Vincent asked. Ethan turned to Natasha, whose face had gone pale. Alexandra Ripley, she whispered. Beckham is her godfather. That's how she rose through the ranks so quickly. A sudden crash from below shook the building's foundation. Then, another. The lights flickered. Vincent's radio crackled with a security alert. Multiple armed intruders, basement level. They're going after the safe, Ethan realized. Whatever evidence is hidden there. The building's fire alarm began blaring. Through the window, Ethan could see residents evacuating, police escorting them to safety. We need to get to the basement, Ethan said, pulling up the building's original blueprints on his computer. According to this, there's a hidden room behind the north wall of the boiler room. That area is sealed off, Vincent noted. Has been for years. That's where my folding table was, Ethan recalled. Where I built my startup. Right against that wall. More explosions rocked the building. The power went out completely, emergency lights casting everything in a dim red glow. They're destroying the evidence, Natasha said urgently. We have to hurry. They made their way down the emergency stairwell. At the lobby level, they encountered Jack Deckard, arm bandaged from the coffee shop shootout. Buildings compromised, Jack reported. Beckham's people are using the confusion to plant explosives. They're planning to bring down the entire structure. To destroy the evidence, Ethan concluded, and make it look like an accident. Exactly. I've called for backup, but they're at least 20 minutes out. We don't have 20 minutes. Ethan pointed toward the basement access. The evidence we need is down there. If we can reach it before they finish setting the charges. An explosion larger than the others cut him off, sending debris cascading down the stairwell. When the dust settled, the basement access was blocked. There's another way, Natasha said, through the old service tunnels. They connect to the subway system, but there's an access point in the building's east wing. Jack gave her a suspicious look. How do you know that? Because I mapped every inch of this building when I worked for Westfield, she admitted. I know its secrets better than anyone. As they navigated the dimly lit corridors toward the east wing, Jack pulled Ethan aside. Can you trust her? Really? I don't know, Ethan admitted. But right now she's our best chance. The service tunnel access was hidden behind a utility panel in the laundry room. The narrow passage beyond was damp and smelled of mold, illuminated only by their phone flashlights. This should lead us directly beneath the boiler room, Natasha said, leading the way. We can access it from below. As they progressed deeper into the tunnels, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It contained a video of Dominic Toretto's daughter, still alive, but clearly terrified. The message read, *, turn back now, or she dies. Final warning, *. Ethan showed it to the others. They're bluffing, Jack said. They need her alive as leverage. Are you willing to bet her life on that? Ethan asked. Before Jack could answer, gunfire erupted ahead. They ducked into an alcove as bullets ricocheted off the tunnel walls. 3 shooters, Vincent whispered, peering around the corner. Blocking our path to the boiler room. Another explosion shook the tunnel, loosening debris from the ceiling. Water began seeping through cracks in the concrete. The building's foundation is compromised, Jack warned. This whole place could come down any minute. Natasha grabbed Ethan's arm. There's something else you should know. Her eyes were intense in the dim light. The safe, I've seen it. What? When? The day Keaton gave me that letter. He showed me where it was hidden, made me memorize the combination. She took a deep breath. He said, if anything happened to him, I should find you and help you access it. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wasn't sure if I could trust you, she admitted. Your revenge plan. I was afraid you'd destroy the evidence just to hurt the people who mock you. Ethan stared at her, anger and betrayal mingling with a grudging understanding. What else haven't you told me? Before she could answer, Vincent signaled from the tunnel entrance. We've got company. Charles Beckham himself stood at the other end of the tunnel, flanked by armed guards. Beside him was Alexandra Ripley, looking pristine despite the chaos around her. Ethan, Beckham called, his voice echoing in the confined space. This doesn't have to end badly. Just walk away. Like you walked away after having my father killed, Ethan called back. Beckham sighed dramatically. Your father was my friend. His death was unfortunate, but necessary for the greater good. He gestured to the crumbling tunnel around them. This building will come down in less than 10 minutes. You can die here, or you can take the generous settlement I'm offering and disappear. What about Dominic's daughter? The child will be released unharmed once we have confirmation that the evidence is destroyed. Beckham's smile was cold. I'm not a monster, Ethan. Another explosion, closer this time. The tunnel groaned ominously. He's stalling, Jack whispered, waiting for the building to collapse on us. Natasha tugged Ethan toward a maintenance shaft partially hidden behind fallen debris. This leads directly to the boiler room. We can make it if we go now. Ethan hesitated, looking back at Vincent and Jack. Cover us. As gunfire erupted again, Ethan and Natasha slipped into the narrow shaft, climbing the rusted ladder toward what he hoped was salvation, not just for him, but for Dominic's innocent daughter and everyone else the consortium had hurt. Behind them, the tunnel partially collapsed, cutting off their path back to Vincent and Jack. "We're on our own now," Natasha said grimly. Above them, the boiler room awaited, and with it, the truth about everything Ethan had spent 7 years believing. The maintenance shaft opened into the Westbrook basement, or what remained of it. Half the ceiling had collapsed, pipes burst, and water pooled on the concrete floor. The old boiler room was barely recognizable. The equipment Ethan had once maintained now twisted heaps of metal. There, Natasha pointed to the north wall, partially obscured by debris. Behind that brick section. They waded through ankle-deep water toward the wall. The building shuddered around them, dust raining down with each new explosion above. "How much time do you think we have?" Ethan asked, clearing debris from the wall. "Minutes at most," Natasha replied, helping him expose the bricks. "Beckham won't risk being caught in the collapse. He'll trigger the final charges once he's clear." Ethan ran his hands along the wall, feeling for any irregularity. "How does it open?" "Pressure plate," Natasha said, pressing a specific brick. The wall shuddered, then a section swung inward, revealing a small chamber beyond. Inside stood a vintage floor safe, the kind banks used in the early 20th century. Beside it sat a folding table identical to the one Ethan had used for his startup. "Your father's original workstation," Natasha explained. "Keaton preserved it exactly as it was." Ethan stared at the table, remembering his father's encouragement, his belief in Ethan's vision. A vision that he now realized had been part of a much larger plan. "The combination?" he asked, kneeling before the safe. Natasha recited a series of numbers, which Ethan entered into the dial. The safe opened with a satisfying click. Inside was a single waterproof case containing hard drives, paper documents, and a sealed envelope with Ethan's name written in his father's handwriting. "This is everything," Natasha whispered. "Financial records, blackmail material, evidence of murders disguised as accidents, including your father's." Ethan took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter and a small key. "My son, asterisk if you're reading this, then you've discovered the truth I tried to shield you from. Charles Beckham, my partner and friend, betrayed not just me, but everything we once stood for. What began as innovative urban development became corruption, exploitation, and eventually murder, asterisk. Asterisk your algorithm wasn't just a business opportunity. It was a weapon designed to expose their entire network. I placed you at Westbrook because I knew Harold had created this failsafe. I needed someone I could trust absolutely to find it when the time was right, asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry for the pain this path has caused you. Know that I was always proud of you, not for what you built, but for who you are, asterisk. Asterisk, the enclosed key opens a safety deposit box at First National. Inside is everything you'll need to rebuild once this is over, asterisk. With love and faith, Dad. Ethan wiped away tears as another explosion rocked the building, larger than before. Concrete chunks fell around them. "We need to go," Natasha urged. "Now." They secured the case and hurried back toward the maintenance shaft, only to find it blocked by collapsed debris. "There's another way," Ethan said, remembering the building's layout. Through the old coal chute. They navigated the flooding basement, the water now knee-deep and rising. The coal chute access was partially blocked, but they managed to force it open enough to squeeze through. "Ladies first," Ethan said, helping Natasha into the narrow passage. Before following, he glanced back at the room where he'd once lived and dreamed, where his father had apparently planned an elaborate counter-operation against his own corrupt partner. The folding table was now underwater. The past, literally, submerged. The coal chute led to a maintenance yard behind the building. They emerged into chaos. Police cruisers, fire trucks, evacuated residents, and news crews documenting the progressive collapse of Westbrook Apartments. Vincent spotted them first, rushing over with Jack Deckard. "Thank God," Vincent said, embracing Ethan briefly. "We thought you were trapped inside." "Did you get it?" Jack asked, eyeing the case Ethan clutched. "Everything," Ethan confirmed. "Enough to bring down Beckham and the entire consortium." "Speaking of Beckham," Vincent said grimly, "he's gone." Escaped during the evacuation. And Alexandra Ripley? In custody, Jack replied. She's already offering to cooperate in exchange for immunity. A familiar voice called Ethan's name. He turned to see Dominic Toretto rushing toward them, his daughter in his arms. They let her go, Dominic said, tears streaming down his face. Just dropped her off down the block. She's okay. The little girl clung to her father, the teddy bear still clutched in her small hand. Did they hurt you? Ethan asked her gently. She shook her head. The lady said I could go home because the game was over. What lady, sweetheart? Dominic asked. The pretty lady with red hair. She said she was sorry and gave me candy. Ethan and Natasha exchanged looks. Sounds like Alexandra had a change of heart, Natasha said softly. A massive explosion tore through Westbrook's foundation. The assembled crowd watched in horror as the building collapsed in on itself. Decades of history reduced to rubble in seconds. In the aftermath, as dust settled over the neighborhood, Ethan found himself standing beside Natasha, surveying the destruction of his past and the unexpected birth of his future. All those apartments, he murmured. All those people's homes. You had insurance on the building, Natasha reminded him. Everyone will be taken care of. Ethan nodded, then turned to face her fully. Why did you really help me? The truth this time. Natasha's green eyes held his steadily. Because 7 years ago, I made a choice that I've regretted every day since. I knew what they were planning to do to you, and I did nothing. She took a deep breath. When you bought the building, when you came back, I saw it as my chance to finally do the right thing. You could have just told me everything from the beginning. Would you have believed me? The spy who watched you fail. She shook her head. You needed to discover the truth yourself. To see that this was never about mockery or petty revenge. It was about something much bigger. Jack approached with news. We've got teams tracking Beckham. All his accounts are frozen. It's only a matter of time. And Ellis McLean? Ethan asked. Safe house. His testimony plus the evidence you recovered, Beckham doesn't stand a chance. Jack glanced at the case Ethan still held. Speaking of which, we should get that somewhere secure. As Jack took the case, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 7 years of pain and pursuit suddenly replaced by something unexpected. Purpose. What now? Natasha asked quietly. First, I make sure everyone from Westbrook has somewhere to go. Ethan surveyed the displaced residents gathered nearby. Then I finish what my father started. How? Ethan pulled out his phone, showing her the property portfolio he'd been accumulating, not for revenge, but for something entirely different. Affordable housing developments. Community ownership programs. Everything the consortium was working against. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You never intended to become a ruthless landlord, did you? The revenge narrative was convenient cover while I investigated, Ethan admitted. But no, that was never the plan. As emergency workers continued to secure the scene, Ethan spotted Tony Montana, the coffee spiller who'd been among the first to receive an envelope when Ethan bought the building. Excuse me a moment, Ethan said to Natasha before approaching his former tormentor. I'm sorry about your apartment, Ethan offered. Tony looked surprised at the sympathy. Thanks. Listen about the past. It doesn't matter anymore, Ethan cut him off. What matters is what happens next. He handed Tony a business card. I'm developing a new property 2 blocks east. I could use someone who knows construction management. Tony stared at the card in disbelief. After everything. Second chances, Ethan said simply. We all deserve them. As he rejoined Natasha, Vincent approached with news from his team tracking Beckham's movements. We've got a lead, Vincent reported. One of Beckham's private planes filed a flight plan to the Caymans. Takes off in 3 hours. Ethan's phone rang. Jack Deckard. We need you at the federal building immediately, Jack said, without preamble. Beckham sent a message. He'll only surrender to you. Why me? He says you're your father's son, that you'll understand his offer. Ethan hung up, suddenly aware that the final confrontation was at hand. The man who had orchestrated his father's death, his company's destruction, and 7 years of misdirected pain was offering an endgame. I need to end this, he told Natasha. To his surprise, she took his hand firmly in hers. Not alone, you don't. In that moment, standing amid the ruins of Westbrook Apartments, Ethan realized that his journey for justice had given him something he never expected. Allies who had become more. A mission larger than revenge. And perhaps, in Natasha's steady gaze, something that looked remarkably like a future. Together, then, he agreed. The final confrontation with Charles Beckham awaited, and with it, the chance to transform his father's legacy from tragedy to triumph. The federal building buzzed with activity as Ethan and Natasha were escorted through security checkpoints to a conference room on the top floor. FBI agents moved with urgent purpose, preparing for Beckham's surrender, if that's what this truly was. I don't trust this, Vincent murmured, joining them in the elevator. Beckham doesn't surrender. It's not his style. I agree, Jack Deckard said, his arm now properly bandaged. That's why we've got tactical teams surrounding the building and monitoring all approaches. The conference room overlooked the city skyline, the ruins of Westbrook Apartments visible in the distance. A table had been prepared with recording equipment and legal documents. 2 federal prosecutors waited alongside the FBI special agent in charge. Mr. Wick, the lead prosecutor, greeted him. Mr. Beckham has agreed to turn himself in and provide testimony against the consortium in exchange for certain considerations. What considerations? Ethan asked. Reduced charges, witness protection, and, she hesitated, a private conversation with you before he signs anything. That's not happening, Vincent interjected. Too risky. We'll sweep the room, Jack assured them. He'll be unarmed, with agents just outside. Ethan considered the offer. I want to hear what he has to say. 30 minutes later, Charles Beckham was escorted into the room. The man who had once been Ethan's father's closest friend and partner looked smaller than Ethan remembered. His tailored suit hanging slightly loose, his once commanding presence diminished by circumstance. Ethan. Beckham nodded as the agents removed his handcuffs. You look like him. More than ever. The room cleared except for Ethan and Beckham, with Vincent and Jack watching through one-way glass. Why did you kill him? Ethan asked without preamble. Beckham sat heavily in a chair across from him. I didn't. Not directly. You had him poisoned. Made it look like heart failure. Yes. No denial. No justification. Just acknowledgement. Why? Ethan pressed. Because he discovered what we'd become. Beckham's eyes held a weariness that bordered on despair. Your father and I started with a vision, Ethan. Urban renewal. Affordable housing. Community investment. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. You lost it. He didn't. True. Beckham nodded. The money was too good. The power too intoxicating. By the time I realized what I'd sacrificed to get it, I was in too deep. So you killed your best friend when he tried to stop you. I made a business decision. Beckham's mouth twisted bitterly. That's what I told myself. Just business. Ethan leaned forward. And destroying my company? Sabotaging my life? Was that just business too? That was survival. Your algorithm would have exposed everything. All the properties, the bribes, the offshore accounts. A glimmer of the old Beckham emerged. It was remarkable work, actually. Your father would have been proud. He was, Ethan said coldly. But you never gave me the chance to know that. Beckham's eyes narrowed. You think I'm the villain of this story. And perhaps I am. But your father wasn't as innocent as you believe. What's that supposed to mean? Harold Keaton was your father's half-brother, yes. But do you know why your father placed you at Westbrook? Why he maneuvered you into that specific building? To access the evidence Keaton had hidden. Beckham laughed, a hollow sound. Oh, Ethan, he placed you there as bait. The words hung in the air between them. You're lying, Ethan said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Your father knew we were monitoring his movements. He knew we suspected he was gathering evidence against us. So he set you up as a diversion, the brilliant son developing a revolutionary algorithm. While we focused on stopping you, he was working with Keaton to document everything. Beckham leaned forward. He sacrificed your dreams to save his own legacy. No, Ethan shook his head. He was trying to protect me. By putting you directly in harm's way? By watching you be humiliated daily? By letting you believe your failure was your own fault? Beckham's voice softened to something almost like pity. Your father was a great man in many ways, but he used you, Ethan, just as I used Alexandra, just as the consortium used all of us. Before Ethan could respond, an explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared. The lights flickered. Vincent burst into the room. It's a diversion. Beckham's people are hitting the evidence lockup. Beckham smiled thinly. Right on schedule. Jack rushed in behind Vincent. The case with the drives is secure, but they've taken Alexandra from custody. That was the plan all along, Ethan realized. This surrender was just to get inside the federal building. Not quite, Beckham replied calmly. This surrender is genuine. I'm finished running. But Alexandra deserves a chance at a new life, away from all this. Another explosion, closer this time. The building shook. We need to move, Jack urged, gun drawn. They're on this floor. As they rushed toward the emergency stairwell, gunfire erupted in the corridor ahead. Vincent pushed Ethan and Natasha behind him, returning fire. This way, Jack directed, leading them down a service corridor. Beckham kept pace, remarkably spry for his age. You should know, Ethan, Alexandra isn't just my goddaughter. She's my daughter. Her mother was your father's secretary. Why are you telling me this now? Ethan demanded as they descended the stairs. Because family matters, Beckham replied. Even broken, corrupted families like ours. The stairwell door below burst open. Armed men in tactical gear rushed upward. Jack and Vincent engaged them, creating cover as Natasha pulled Ethan and Beckham toward a different exit. The evidence, Ethan said suddenly. If they're after Alexandra, they'll go after the evidence next. It's in the secure room on the 3rd floor, Jack called over the gunfire. We need to get there now. They fought their way down to the 3rd floor, the building now in full emergency mode. FBI agents engaged Beckham's mercenaries throughout the corridors. The secure room door hung open, its electronic lock disabled. Inside, 2 agents lay unconscious. The evidence case was gone. Too late, Beckham murmured, almost to himself. Ethan grabbed him by the collar. This was your plan all along. Destroy the evidence, free Alexandra, tie up loose ends. Not quite. Beckham nodded toward a security monitor showing the parking garage. Alexandra Ripley stood beside a black SUV, directing armed men loading equipment. She doesn't have the evidence. Then who does? I do, came Natasha's voice. Ethan turned to find her holding a duplicate of the waterproof case they'd recovered from Westbrook. I made a copy before we handed it over, she explained. Everything's here. The drives, the documents, even your father's letter. Beckham's face hardened. You were always the wild card, Miss Bourne. Keaton trusted you too much. Keaton understood what was at stake, she replied. Just as Ethan's father did. A new explosion rocked the building, this one directly below them. The floor tilted ominously. Structural damage, Vincent warned. This whole section could collapse. We need to get to the roof, Jack decided. Evacuation choppers are inbound. As they made their way upward, Beckham suddenly clutched his chest, stumbling against the wall. Heart condition, he gasped, reaching into his pocket. My medication. Ethan hesitated, then helped the older man retrieve a pill bottle. Beckham swallowed 2 tablets dry. Why are you helping me? Beckham asked between labored breaths. After everything I've done? Because I'm not you, Ethan replied simply. They reached the roof access just as the helicopter arrived. Wind whipped around them as agents helped them aboard. Below, the federal building's east wing began to collapse, floors pancaking into each other. From the air, Ethan watched Alexandra's SUV speed away from the scene, pursued by police vehicles. Her escape, at least for now, had succeeded. She won't get far, Jack shouted over the rotor noise. Every law enforcement agency in the country will be looking for her. Beckham said nothing, his eyes fixed on the disappearing vehicle carrying his daughter. The helicopter banked toward the FBI's secondary facility. Ethan found himself seated across from the man who had orchestrated his father's death and his own downfall. Between them sat the case containing evidence of decades of corruption and crime. Was any of it real? Ethan asked finally. Your partnership with my father? Your vision for better communities? Beckham met his gaze. All of it was real. That's the tragedy, Ethan. We began with the purest intentions. His eyes drifted to the case. And now you hold the power to finish what your father started, or to bury it forever. What do you mean? That evidence will bring down hundreds of people, politicians, judges, business leaders. It will upend the very systems that govern this city. Beckham's voice grew urgent. But it could also be leveraged, used selectively, transformed into influence rather than destruction. You're suggesting I blackmail people instead of exposing them? I'm suggesting you consider the full implications before you act. Beckham leaned closer. Your father understood this. It's why he hesitated so long before moving against us. Some truths are too dangerous to be fully revealed. Natasha touched Ethan's arm. Don't listen to him. This is what he does, twists nobility into corruption, one compromise at a time. The helicopter touched down at the secure facility. As FBI agents moved to take Beckham into custody, he made one final appeal to Ethan. You wanted to know why I agreed to surrender to you specifically, he said. It's because you're the only one who can truly understand what's at stake. Your father's son. His eyes held Ethan's. Think carefully about what you do with that evidence. Power isn't about revenge, Ethan. It's about shaping the future. As Beckham was led away, Ethan stood with the evidence case in his hands, holding the truth about his father, about Westbrook, about the corruption that had shaped his life from the shadows. Jack approached, extending his hand. We'll need that for the prosecution. Ethan hesitated, Beckham's words echoing in his mind. Was this truly what his father would have wanted? Complete exposure? The chaos that would follow? Ethan, Natasha said softly. This was your father's mission. This was what he died for. With that simple truth cutting through the manipulation, Ethan handed the case to Jack. Use it all. Every piece. No matter who it hurts. Jack nodded solemnly. Your father would be proud. Would he? Ethan wondered aloud. Or would he think I'm naive? He'd see a man making a better choice than he did, Natasha answered. Sometimes that's the best legacy we can hope for. As federal agents processed them, took statements, and arranged for secure accommodations, news of Beckham's arrest and the impending revelations about the consortium spread across media channels. The story was already being called the biggest corruption scandal in the city's history. Through it all, Ethan found his thoughts returning not to Beckham or his father, but to the displaced residents of Westbrook. In the chaos of conspiracy and confrontation, he had almost forgotten his promise to ensure they were taken care of. We need to go, he told Natasha and Vincent once they were cleared to leave. There's something I need to do before this day ends. 6 months later, Ethan stood on the rooftop garden of Phoenix Heights, the new residential community built on the former site of Westbrook Apartments. Around him, former Westbrook residents mingled with city officials and community leaders, celebrating the grand opening. Not bad for 6 months' work, Vincent commented, handing Ethan a glass of champagne. The buildings, 3 mid-rise structures arranged around a central courtyard, gleamed in the afternoon sun. Solar panels lined the roofs, community gardens occupied the terraces, and a childcare center and community workspace anchored the ground floor. Couldn't have done it without you, Ethan replied, clinking glasses with his friend. Or without them. He nodded toward the construction team, led by Tony Montana, who had indeed proven himself an exceptional project manager. Nearby, Dominic Toretto guided tours of the new buildings, his daughter Emily skipping alongside him, her teddy bear now wearing a tiny hard hat. The Charles Beckham trial had dominated headlines for months, exposing corruption that reached the highest levels of city government. Dozens of officials had resigned or been indicted. Alexandra Ripley remained at large, though rumors placed her in various locations around the globe. Natasha joined them at the railing, radiant in a simple green dress that matched her eyes. The mayor's assistant is looking for you. Something about a statement for the press. They can wait, Ethan said, slipping his arm around her waist. The past months had transformed their tentative alliance into something neither had expected. A partnership built on shared purpose and growing affection. Jack Deckard approached, looking more relaxed in casual clothes than his usual FBI attire. Quite a turnaround from your original revenge plan, he observed. This was always the real plan, Ethan admitted. The revenge narrative just made it easier to get close to the truth. And the truth set everyone free, Jack noted. Well, almost everyone. News had come that morning that Charles Beckham had died in federal custody, his heart condition finally claiming him before he could testify against his consortium associates. His final act had been to provide a detailed confession, ensuring the prosecutions would continue even without his testimony. Did you read his letter? Jack asked quietly. Ethan nodded. Beckham had left him a private message, an apology of sorts, though characteristically self-serving. I destroyed one weak legacy he had written, but perhaps in doing so, I helped forge a stronger one. He was trying to manipulate me until the very end, Ethan said. Maybe, Natasha replied. Or maybe he finally recognized the truth about you that everyone else already saw. The truth was that Ethan had indeed forged something new from the ashes of Westbrook. Phoenix Holdings had transformed from a revenge vehicle into a community development corporation, with former residents serving as board members. Every tenant from Westbrook had been offered housing in the new buildings at rates they could afford, with ownership options that built equity over time. Across the garden, Ellis McLean, now employed as Phoenix's financial controller, was explaining the community ownership model to interested residents. His testimony had been crucial in the ongoing prosecutions, earning him immunity and a chance at redemption. Have you visited the memorial? Jack asked. At the center of the courtyard stood a small garden with a plaque honoring Richard Wick and Harold Keaton, flawed men whose final collaboration had exposed corruption and ultimately led to something better. This morning, Ethan said, it felt right somehow, acknowledging the past while building something new. As the celebration continued around them, Ethan found himself drawn to the edge of the rooftop, gazing out at the city skyline. So much had changed in the months since Westbrook's collapse, both in the city and within himself. The drive for revenge that had sustained him for 7 years had transformed into something more constructive, a commitment to building rather than destroying, to healing rather than punishing. Natasha joined him at the railing. Penny for your thoughts? I was just thinking about dreams, Ethan replied. 7 years ago, they laughed at mine, called me delusional. And now, he gestured to the community flourishing around them. Now they're living in them. Your father would have loved this, she said softly. This is what he and Keaton originally wanted to create, before greed corrupted their vision. Maybe this is what second chances look like, Ethan reflected. Not just for me, but for everyone who was part of Westbrook. As if on cue, Tony approached with architectural plans for their next project, a similar community development in a struggling neighborhood across town. The investors are on board, Tony reported excitedly. They've seen what we did here and want to replicate it citywide. Not replicate, Ethan corrected. Improve. Each community should reflect the needs of its residents. Always the visionary, Natasha smiled. Later, as evening fell and lights illuminated the new buildings, Ethan found himself alone with Natasha in the rooftop garden. Most guests had departed, leaving them in peaceful solitude beneath the stars. What happens now? She asked, her hand finding his. You've accomplished your mission. Beckham is gone. The truth is out. Justice, of a sort, has been served. Ethan considered the question. For so long, his life had been defined by the past, by loss, betrayal, and the drive for vindication. Now, unexpectedly, he found himself focusing on possibilities rather than grievances. Now we build, he said simply. Not just buildings, but communities, connections. He turned to face her fully. Relationships. Her smile warmed him more than the evening breeze. I'd like that. I should warn you, he added with mock seriousness. I have ambitious plans. I remember, she laughed. I've seen what happens when people laugh at your dreams. Below them, The new residents of Phoenix Heights moved through their homes, lives no longer shadowed by corruption or the whims of landlords who saw them as assets rather than people. Dominic's daughter chased fireflies in the courtyard garden. Ellis McLean shared a bench with one of the senior residents, both laughing at some shared joke. 7 years of pain had somehow transformed into this moment of creation. The landlord who had returned to decide their futures had indeed made his decision, not for vengeance, but for victory of a different kind. They used to call me the nobody, Ethan reflected, the maintenance boy with delusions of grandeur. And now? Natasha asked. Ethan looked out over the community he had built from the rubble of his past. Now I'm just the guy who fixes things. As night settled over Phoenix Heights, Ethan Wick, once mocked, once broken, now rebuilt, embraced both his past and his future. The dreams they had laughed at had become reality, not through revenge, but through the harder, more rewarding path of creation. The landlord had indeed decided their future, and in doing so, had found his own. And there you have it, my amazing viewers. What a journey from revenge to redemption. If you enjoyed this story of transformation and second chances, please hit that subscribe button and join our storytelling family. I'd love to know your favorite part in the comments below. Was it the shocking revelations or the heartwarming conclusion? Where are you watching from today? Remember, like Ethan discovered, our greatest power isn't in tearing others down, but in building something meaningful. Until next time, keep dreaming those big dreams. You never know what might come true.